First of all, great crowd. Really appreciate everybody coming out to cover our program and to cover our student athletes. So really appreciate everybody making time in their summers to come up and spend some time with us. So really excited kind of about where we're at. This is the time of year where you work all off season from really the day spring ball ended to now to get prepared, and I like where we're at. I think we all know we got a lot of question marks this year, probably more than we've had the last 2 years, and I think we have a very, very challenging schedule. But I'm excited. Walking out on the field the other day, we got a good-looking team. You guys will get a chance to see this afternoon, right, Chris? We got a good-looking team. I walked on the field the other day, and Tyler Bowen, who's a massive human being himself, is standing with the tight end group, and there's 6 tight ends out there, and it's a good-looking 6 guys. So we got a good-looking football team. We're athletic. We're inexperienced, but we're talented. I think we got really strong leadership right now. Throughout our program, but specifically with Trace and Nick and Blake for offense, defense, and special teams. So I'm really pleased with that. Before I kind of get into any details, I do want to start with, I want to thank Andy Mutnam and the training staff. This is by far the healthiest team we've had going into camp, and really this summer. We just had more players available to train and develop all summer, and I think you can see that. And same thing with camp right now. We just got more guys that are full go in camp than we've had since we've been here. So I think that's a real positive. I want to thank Andy and his staff for all their hard work. And then also Kayla Matronik, who now I think is actually Kayla Martin, which is much easier to say. Congratulations, Kayla, getting married this summer. But our nutrition program. So I see a major difference in that. Our body fats decreasing. And then just a lot of we did cherry juice after practice the other day and explained to the guys how important that is for not only hydration but more importantly reduction of inflammation and other things like that. So there's a lot of things right now that I walk into the building in the morning and I'm proud. You look at the facilities. And the facilities are really, we're starting to make some progress now. We just moved into brand new meeting rooms, and to watch our players walk into these meeting rooms, and they're proud and they're really nice and they're first class. It's exciting. So you have signs like that in terms of physical signs of progress, but then also signs that maybe I notice as the head coach, like the injury report, and how many guys were able to train all summer, and the nutrition program. So it's just a lot of different areas. Carl Olson, who's working in the athletic department as a sports psychologist, who's been awesome. He's actually been with us for a year, I think a little bit over a year in the athletic department, but I'm not the most trusting with open arms and allowing people kind of inside of our program until I've gotten to know them and make sure they're a good fit. So he's been great with our staff. Came on our staff retreat this summer, and he sent me back an email, and I love feedback. I love feedback. So gave me a bunch of really good feedback, both positive and some constructive criticism, which is always great, so you can grow. But we're just in a good place. We're in a good place. We're young and inexperienced at some spots, but we do have young talent that are competing. And some real depth. One of the most exciting things yesterday was at the end of practice, we always do some type of kicking competition, and we had 4 guys out there that just got on campus a couple of weeks ago and made every single field goal and looked great. And operation time was right. So we all know D-tackle, linebacker, and kicker. Our 3 biggest question marks. We have a lot of other question marks, but they're probably the biggest question marks that we got to get resolved. So to have 4 kickers out there kicking the heck out of the ball and kicking it straight through the uprights is awesome. So you guys will probably see a sign when you go out on the field of some of the progress. I think you'll see the brand new turf. If you haven't seen that yet outside, which you guys know we hadn't been able to use our turf to practice on for a couple of years, so we've regained a field, which is great. But you also see something that's kind of strange to look at, but also pretty cool, is we never had goalposts on the furthest field from Latch, grass field. We got goalposts on there, and I know it's probably not you're like, why is he telling us this story? But one of the things that's cool is we put in Arena League goalposts in there, and it looks crazy on the field. They're so tight, but we're using that for our kickers, so, aim small, miss small. There's just some really good signs going on throughout the program. We're excited about what this season's going to bring. We'll talk to the players a lot about, really, we got to do a great job like we always have in meetings and practice, because the NCAA cut down the amount of practices that we have before our first game, and everybody's under the same rules, but it's kind of changed some of the dynamics. I think you guys know in the past, we've always kind of had these deals from a morale standpoint where we have a practice and we cancel the practice and we go bowling, or we go bowling, or we go swimming. I think the one year we went swimming, and it's hard to do that now because we cut the practices so far back that we don't really have that. The nice thing is now on our day off during camp, we can do some entertainment, which we weren't allowed to do before. I do think there's a difference between canceling a practice and going bowling than entertaining them on a day off. And then the last thing I'll say, we'll open it up to questions, is had a great idea, which I thought on the front end was a great idea. We always go bowling, we always go swimming. So we said, well, what can we do differently? And we said that we would go paintball. This is a great idea, great idea. We'll go paintballing. And so broke the team up, A through whatever is one team, and then at the end, my team, my team. And when I said my team, the doors kicked open and all my coaches came running in, and the administrative staff, and Chris, the camo on and eye black and going crazy. And then I realized that all the things that we've done made these guys run and, missing class, and they were going to get us, So the rules were, when you got shot, you put the gun above your head and you run off the field, and no one's supposed to shoot you at that time. And I got shot in the first round, and I was in the far end of the field. And I put my gun up to run off the field, and literally the entire team just sprayed me. and I'm not kidding, and I'm probably going to do something that I shouldn't do. Crystal said you probably shouldn't do this, but you guys all see this? So that's one. That's one. This is the best one. You guys, can you see that one? Now, most of those shots came when I wasn't supposed to be getting hit, running off the field. It was like cat the whole way across the field. So, great idea on the front end, not really good in terms of the execution of it. So, we're in a really, really good place, but we got a lot of work to do, and we got tremendous challenge this season. So, open up the questions.
Raise your hand and we'll get a mic to you.
I have two questions. One, when's the media coach's paintball game?
Are you sure? Are you sure? After that story, are you sure you want that?
I think there are some in the media that would really enjoy it. Okay. Secondly, what is...
Just so you know, that goes both ways.
Sure does. Secondly, what changed with Manny Bowen since December? Does the fact that you have a need at linebacker, did that facilitate the decision or affect the decision?
Yeah, I know this is one of these questions that you guys are going to ask me, and however I answer it, I don't know if you're necessarily going to believe it, but really, I don't want any decisions that we make being need-based. I also don't want decisions that we make being influenced because of the perception of it. I want to do things because they're the right things to do. Does that make sense? So we created some stipulations for Manny to achieve from the time he left the program, and if he lived up to his end of the bargain, then he would have an opportunity to earn his way back on the roster. And I think probably the biggest part of that is Manny graduates in December, and we felt like this plan was going to give him the best opportunity to graduate in December and leave this way. And we didn't make it easy on him. And you know, I was surprised when he said, I'm going to try to grind this thing out, because the easy thing to do would have been to just transfer. You know, so you know, we put a bunch of stipulations out. He did those stipulations. After that, you know, I can't tell you what his role on the team is going to be like. To be honest, I have no idea. You know, but I do think the plan that we put in place was the right thing to do for Manny and gives him the best opportunity in December to graduate from Penn State. Everything else is icing on the cake. Would I like to have him from a football perspective? Yeah, but you know, I have no idea how this whole thing's going to play out, but we did think it was the right thing to do to get him in the best position to graduate in December.
James, everybody that's listed on your roster, they're all here. The roster we got this morning, and other changes there that we should be aware of?
I'm sorry, so you're asking me the roster we put out this morning is
Right,
accurate?
is everybody here? Is what I'm asking. Everybody.
It's more than the 110. It's,
Okay.
It's retired.
Yeah, okay, I'm glad we clarified that. So we're allowed to bring 110 guys into camp. So I think it used to be 105. And say move that number up to 110, or the Big Ten move that number up to 110. So we never have everybody in camp, because we typically carry about 120 players on our roster. So there's always some guys that aren't able to make it to camp, you know, based on, you know, that is based on need. You know, so what we do is we kind of break down the roster of what we need in camp to make sure that we get enough reps and also help limit some soft tissue injuries. So for example, I think you guys heard me say in the spring, we've been using this catapult system, which is essentially a navigation system that tracks running and heart rate and all those types of things. Has been really valuable. And that whole argument, who runs more, the receivers or the DBs, it's not even close, it's the receivers. So it's need based on how many players do we need in camp to be able to practice, how many players do we need, you know, at each position to reduce some of the reps, so that if you do get a pull or a twist or a tweak, it doesn't stress the rest of the group out too much. So that is need-based, based on what we do in camp, and you know, there's some give and take there. And then the nice thing is, you know, those guys are kind of like on the waiver wires, because if you do get an injury during camp, the NCAA allows you to replace those guys, so you can pick up the phone and call. As long as they're not in an internship or something like that, you know, you can replace them on your camp roster.
And just to clarify, Braylon Franklin, has he moved on, or he wasn't on the roster?
Yeah, Braylon Franklin is no longer a part of the program.
Thank you.
Hey, James.
How you doing?
You mentioned how good-looking the team looks. Have you had a chance to look at the offensive line? How excited are you to have all those guys out there? And what do you anticipate the competition will be like?
Yeah, I think it'll be good. You know, as you guys know, I was excited about the offensive line last year, and I thought we made great progress. I think there's still a difference between having a legitimate Big Ten offensive line that we had last year and being able to have an offensive line that allows you to compete consistently with top 10 programs. And we took a real nice step last year at that, and you know, that's still what we're working towards. You know, and I think you guys saw that. Those games that we were able to protect pretty consistently, there was games that we were able to run the ball pretty consistently, and then there was games where the running game, you know, disappeared from a scheme standpoint, but also just being able to get consistent push and movement up front. So I think we're headed in that direction. I do think it's one of our strengths. I think our quarterback position is a strength on offense. I think our offensive line is a strength. And you know, I'm probably different than maybe some people. I actually think, you know, we made dramatic improvement last year, but as we all know, there's still work to be done.
Hey James, how you doing aside from the bruising?
How you doing?
Good. Question regarding the new redshirt rule. How does that change or alter your approach as a staff to how you handle that personnel at different points of the season, specifically now in the next few weeks during training camp?
Yeah, I think for the people that have followed us, over the last couple of years, you know, we kind of have this green, yellow, red system where about 3 weeks into camp, I'll meet with all the freshmen or first-time students on campus, and I'll say, hey, you're a green, we think we're gonna play you from day one. You're a yellow, we're gonna try to save your red shirt if we can, but if there's injuries, then we'll end up playing. And a red shirt's a guy that we think, more likely than not is going to redshirt. So I think where it's probably going to affect, it's going to affect those yellow group guys. If you're not ready to play, we're not putting you on the field. I think a lot of times, I think people think, oh, well, we can play them, so we're going to play them all. They still got to earn the right to be on the field. But I think those guys that are in that yellow category that aren't obvious day one contributors, you want to get a feel for them. You want to get them out there. You want to see what they can do. So we'll try to do that early in the season with 2 games, typically home games, because one of the things that I think probably should have been discussed a little bit more is if we were going to increase basically our roster by about 15 or 20 players, available players, then we should have increased the travel roster. And what I mean by that is we could travel 70 players to away games. So if we're going to move this number up 20, we probably should have moved it up, 5 or 10 players to travel. I think we should be able to do that in the Big Ten. Travel 75, maybe travel 80, because now the way I look at it is, those freshmen that you're going to play in those 4 games, they're probably going to be home games because you have a hard time getting the number to 70 anyway. I know that might sound crazy, but to come up with your travel squad. So we're probably going to do 2 home games early, and then we'll save those 2 games for later in the year to solve problems, an injury later in the year, or the bowl game, which is, I think, you'll really want that flexibility at that point in the season. And don't get me wrong, we may play a guy that, early in the season, those 2 games, and we may see that he's able to help us, and then we just keep playing him too. So there's going to be, I think we're going to have an overall philosophy and general plan, but as it'll be tailored to that specific young man and his situation, based on need and depth and health and so on and so forth.
Hey James, how you doing?
Good, how are you?
Good. I want to ask you about Trace. Has recruiting and knowing and coaching Trace McSorley changed your perspective at all on maybe quarterbacks or characteristics that you look for in quarterbacks now that you may not have thought of in the past?
No, because I think that's why we took him. Because we had that philosophy. I think you have to be careful in the NFL, and I think you have to be careful in college football. So you have your program set up, and you got these parameters. So say at corner, you want your corners to be, 5'11" to 6'1" in that range, and run between 4.5 and a 4.4, or whatever it may be. And that is great. And there's a lot of cookie cutter programs that do that, and the NFL does that as well, and I get that. But that doesn't mean you bypass a great player because he's 5'9". Now you can't have a roster full of 5'9" corners, but we want to be able to say, hey, we're going to take a great player because he's a great player, and if he's outside of your normal metrics that you use, then that's fine. But you also can't have a roster full of exceptions either. So Trace had the characteristics that I think are most important. He's smart, he's tough, he's a winner. Has been that way at every single level. He's got a lot of the desirable skills and traits that everybody's looking for. The thing is, he doesn't walk through the door and pass that eyeball test. But I think the positive thing is that eyeball test is changing. I mean, you look at last year's Heisman Trophy winner. You look at the first pick in the draft. You look at Drew Brees. You look at Russell Wilson. In the old days, you never saw those guys in the NFL. So I think it is changing a little bit, but it hasn't really changed us because that's why we took him. I mean, we were one of the few schools in the country that offered him, to play quarterback, and we're fortunate, to be able to get him.
Hey Coach, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Good. Hey, 2 questions for you. Coolest thing you did in the offseason, and secondly, you always talk about how you get out of bed each morning with a back handspring out of bed. The first week of practice, is that back handspring, a little higher, a little more juice in it when you get these guys back here and can actually go?
Yeah, I think I like the diversity of the job. I don't know if I'm a guy that could have sat, behind a desk or the same job 365 days a year. I love, watching film. I love, watching guys work out in the weight room. I love being on the field with them and practice, whether it's spring ball or whether it's camp. I love, obviously, game days in Beaver Stadium. I like going out recruiting and seeing people all over the country and things like that. So I like the diversity of the job. But yeah, I think, obviously, as you get closer to the season and you smell the fresh cut grass and the fields getting lined, that's when it starts to kind of get real for you. And State College, Pennsylvania, I'm always amazed at how green it is here. I mean, it's beautiful in the summer. So, yeah, I think obviously, the closer you get to the season, that's why you work so hard all off season, to allow your players and your program to be successful in the season. So, yeah, is there a difference between getting up in the morning, knowing that that's helping us get ready for App State? Yeah. Is that different than getting up and, flying to 3 different states to see, 4 different prospects in a 4-hour period of time? Yeah, probably. But yeah, I'm blessed and fortunate to coach at Penn State. And, I'm blessed and fortunate to have, my family and our health and all those types of things. So I'm pretty much like that year round, but does it spike up a little bit in season? Yeah. And then the first part of your question was?
Coolest thing you did in the off-season?
Coolest thing I did in the off-season. That's an interesting term.
Besides get shot.
Yeah, it's an interesting term. I used to have people come up to me all the time, what do you do in off-season? You teach classes, But, to be honest, we really don't have an off-season. And, the decision that we made to go to, the summer visits really caused some challenges, because now we're trying to do official visits. We're trying to do camps on the same day, because your camp window's tight as well. And then most importantly, we're supposed to be spending time with our own players and developing them. And then, by the way, our ultimate responsibility is to be great husbands and fathers and those things. So, it's challenging. I don't know if there is necessarily truly an off season. But the coolest thing maybe is, maybe going boating with the family and then rafting, in the back, and that fine line of how fast do you go and over the waves and twist to get them to bounce and fly out of the raft without, throwing them off, hitting the water at 35 miles an hour, and your wife getting upset with you. So it's that fine line. So probably that.
Corey?
James. Hi there.
Nope, sorry.
I want to ask you about Miles Sanders. Not just his impact on the field, what you expect to see from him this season, but also his impact on his teammates as maybe an emerging leader. And finally, what does he need to work on in this camp in the early season to reach his potential?
Yeah, obviously very talented guy. He's been very fortunate to have an opportunity to practice and train and learn from and learn with Saquon Barkley. And now's his time. And as you can imagine, he's very hungry. He's very hungry for the opportunity. And, obviously our other backs as well. Mark Allen and Jonathan Thomas are 2 guys that have, been in a similar situation, and maybe even more pronounced because they've been here longer. But Miles is kind of steady Eddie. He's kind of been who he's been since he stepped on campus. Really mature. He's got a great supportive family, and specifically his mom, who we have a very good relationship with, me and Terry Smith, as well as the rest of the coaches. And I just kind of keep seeing him grow physically, academically. He's doing extremely well, and and I see him trying to mentor the young backs. I thought Mark Allen specifically did a great job, yesterday with Ricky Slade at practice. And I think that's when you really got a good thing going, when your older players are really embracing those younger players and bringing them on. And Miles is a big part of that as well. So I know he's hungry. I know he's excited. He's doing all the right things off the field, which we're big believers in. The discipline off the field translates to on the field. We talk about it all the time with our guys. And Miles is a guy that's really taking advantage of this Penn State experience, because like a lot of us as males, there was still a lot of maturing to do. I tell people all the time, males, I can speak for myself, we're pretty much idiots until we're 35 years old, and Miles has really matured from high school to now, And, I think he's really taken advantage of what this opportunity presents for him. So I think he's going to have a big year. I think we're going to have a lot of production out of our running back position. Jonathan Thomas in our leadership council meeting the other day said, that I went around kind of each guy asking them kind of where they think we're at. And Jonathan Thomas said that we're going to be really good at running back, and we will have just as much production this year, if not more, at the running back position than we had last year. And I said, okay, Jonathan Thomas, I appreciate you saying that. He looked at me and goes, I just want to be clear. We will have just as much production or more production at the running back position we had last year, which, I love their confidence, So, I think our team's in a good place. I think Miles is a really good example of that.
James, how closely are you keeping an eye on the Ohio State situation, and have you talked to the team about it?
Obviously, we are very sensitive, to specifically what's happened at Ohio State. I think we're also very sensitive to what's happening in our world and, in society and in our country. So it's something we're very, very sensitive to. But as you can imagine, my focus is on Penn State and our program and what we need to do with our players. I think you guys know I'm always using examples to talk to our players about our staff. I do it all year long in our team meetings and things like that. But yeah, very sensitive to what's going on there at Ohio State. But our focus is really on our program and what we need to do to educate the people within our program as much as we possibly can with these types of issues.
Hey, Coach. You mentioned in Chicago, James Johnson being somebody that could compete for that Mike linebacker spot. How do you feel he compares athletically to some of the guys you have on scholarship at that position?
Good. I thought yesterday he had a really good practice. I think what happens typically with guys is, you really want guys in one of two categories. They either stand out to you because they're flashing athleticism and making plays, or you don't notice them because they're consistently just doing their job. You don't want the other category where your eyes are drawn to them because they're not making plays or they're not lining up, they're not doing the right things. And I think, Jan, yesterday ran the defense and played with a lot of confidence, and he reminds us in some ways of B. Smith, who had a great career for us. So I think Jan's right there in the battle, and he's had a great summer, has done all the things he needs to do to give himself the best chance to earn that job, and also to give our defense the best chance to be successful. He's going to be right there in the hunt of it, and I think he's going to have a significant role. Now, how significant that role is, we'll see. This press conference is great, I get it, but I've only had one day, really seeing these guys, so it's not like I have these real profound answers for you after one day of practice.
Time for two more. We'll start with Corey.
Coach, with the sports betting that's going to be coming into the country, are there challenges for a coach of young men? Do you have to talk to them about certain things to stay clear of with that subject?
Yeah, I've been asking people to kind of help me with this to make sure, I'm clear and I'm not missing anything, because I don't really see how we are or should be approaching it any different. It's not like there wasn't, gambling before. I would hope with the change, and part of the reason why the change was made is so it's a little bit more controlled. But I went to college and I've been doing this for 23 years. I think there's been a significant amount of gambling in our country and in our state for a long time, and now it's I hope it's going to be monitored and controlled by the states. So we always are going to educate our players and our program about these things and things that they need to be aware of from an NCAA perspective, from a gambling perspective. From a life perspective, so I don't really see how it changes our approach as coaches from an educational perspective. This flies all over.
Last question to Mike.
Hi, James. In Chicago, you talked about there's 4 or 5 programs in the country that have kind of separated themselves from the pack, and obviously that's where you want to get to.
I know where this is going.
Well, okay. A couple of things. One, how much harder is it to do if one of those couple of programs is in the same division, in the same conference as you? And the other piece is, it seems like you made a move to more national recruiting in the last year. How much is that a must if you're going to get to that top group?
Yeah, the second part of your question first, yeah, I don't think it's a must, but I think no different than any other organization, you better have diversity. You better have diversity. You better have flexibility, because you're not going to be able to follow the same exact model every year. There's going to be some years where the state is really strong, or the region is really strong, and there's going to be some years where it's not. And the years that the state's not strong, you're going to have to be, stronger in the region, and hopefully the region supports that. And there's going to come a time where maybe the state and the region aren't strong, and then you're going to have to be able to go national. And that always happens maybe in a specific position, or maybe one year. I think it was last year. It was a crazy year in the region for tight ends. There was 4 national recruit tight ends that not only were evaluated that way by the people that ranked those things, but also from us. I mean, there was 4 tight ends within driving distance of campus that I thought were national type recruits. And then there'll be another year where there's not a tight end, within 6 hours that we think, so you got to have that flexibility built in your system to solve your problems, if that makes sense. So I'm not one of these guys that feel like you have to go national to win the way we want to win. Because one of the things I think you have to be careful is when you go national, is you're not going to know the national prospect as well as you know the regional prospect, because you have more opportunities to get to know them and build a personal relationship up, and that's where the fit is so critical. The film can be great, the transcripts can be great, the fit has got to be really good. So we're always going to approach it that way, and we got to have enough flexibility and diversity within our plan that we can overcome whatever challenges there may be, if that makes sense. Then the first part of your question, does it make things difficult when your conference has some of the top programs in the country all on one side of the conference? Is that your question?
Well, sort of. I mean, I think we all know who 3 or 4 would be that are in that top shelf, and one of them, right, is in your division, right?
Right. So is what you're asking, does it make it more challenging to get into that group if some of those programs are on your side of the conference, right? Okay. Yeah. I mean, yeah, obviously, I think if your conference is loaded with more top 10 programs than other conferences, then yeah, that's the whole discussion about scheduling that I think you guys know we've had a lot of. If your conference already plays 9 games and for a while didn't play FCS opponents, and your conference is loaded with top 10 opponents, and most of those top 10 opponents are on our side of the conference, the division, then yeah, it makes things really challenging. And I think other conferences have seen at times that they're similar. I think our conference, I think if you look at it, you study it historically, you can make the argument that there's been times where programs have been up and programs have been down, but if you look at it from top to bottom over the long term, most of the top programs have been the top programs, and that's college football. That's how it is. So yeah, is it challenging? Yeah, but we embrace that challenge. We embrace that challenge, and that's what makes it so exciting about being at Penn State, and that's why players come here to play in those types of games. But that's also why we have to be very strategic about what we do out of conference. And that's what I do. I try to be as strategic as we possibly can with every aspect of the program. Scheduling is one part of that, to give us the best chance to be as successful as we all want to be.
Thank you very much, Coach.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. Have a great day. Appreciate everybody coming out supporting us.
We'll be joined by Ricky Browning momentarily.
And I will get with Chris to schedule The paintball. And there'll be some specific members of the media that will be invited.
You look forward to it.
Those pictures of you are going to be on the internet forever.
You don't think I realized that before I lifted my shirt up? The camera's going,